Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I opened this time.
Beautiful. Yay.
Yay. Welcome back to another episode of
Wicked.
Mysterious. I'm your host, Katie.
And I'm Danny.
And this is episode number 22. 22. Yay.
Yay.
So how's things?
Good. How are you?
Good. This is kind of a long one, so we shouldn't do a lot of chit-chatting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's me. Hi. Oh, it's me. It's me today. Sorry if you were thinking it was Danny. It's me.
Yeah, we're switching it up now. Nobody knows what's going on. Not even us.
We're not predictable at all. So today I have a story for you about the Dyatlov Pass.
Ooh, I love this one.
And I kept you in suspense of what this was going to be for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I finally disclosed it to you last week. And I shouldn't have. I should have kept it a surprise.
Yeah.
But you promised you wouldn't do more research on it.
Nope, I have not.
So there's probably going to be some new details.
I feel like I need a snack for this, but I won't.
Okay.
I'll refrain from snacking.
Yeah, please, because we'll have to edit like burps and so much.
Never burp. What are you talking about?
Yeah, okay. At least mouth sounds, right? Those are always tricky.
We're getting better.
Oh, I'm getting better, you mean? It's me?
Well, you're the mouth sounds and I'm the ums.
Oh, okay.
It's so bad. I spend so much time in. Sometimes I leave them in because it sounds unnatural how much I cut them out.
Why do I have so many mouth sounds?
I don't know.
Sorry, people.
I think it was because your mic was better, so I probably have them now too.
Yeah. See, it just did it again.
Yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
The one.
That's it. All right. So, February 1st to the 2nd in 1959, something absolutely horrific and bizarre took place in the northern Ural Mountains in the then Soviet Union when all 9 experienced hikers met their unexpected fate. Their experiences and death circumstances still remain a mystery to this day. Let's get into it. I have to put my recording voice on. During the last week, I'm just kidding. During the last week of January in 1959, a group of grad students taking a break from their studies prepared for a skiing expedition through the northern Soviet Union, which is now Russia. They originally began as a group of 10. These students were all very experienced and had already earned their grade 2 certification for hiking, and they were all very excited to experience the beauty of Mount Ortorten. Okay, this is a Russian story, so I apologize. I am going to do my best to not completely fucking sabotage the names and the different things. It's a lot. It is a lot. It's hard to keep up with. I gotta be honest. I might use letters for last names here and there. Yeah. There's a lot of Yuris in Russia.
Yeah.
I think there was like 3 Yuris in this group of 10.
Oh, wow.
Right? I guess it could be like Caitlin. That's a common name too. Yeah. Okay, anyway.
Amanda, remember that whole conversation?
Yes.
How many Amandas we know?
We do.
I know so many Jessicas that I don't even know which one I'm texting
and
sometimes.
Ashley's. Yeah, it's so much. Okay. All right. So their final destination. They would become grade 3 certified hikers after this trip. The leader of the group was Igor Dyatlov, born January 13th, 1936. Now, there's 10 of them, and I didn't give zodiac signs to all of them. But I did notice there's a lot of January birthdays in here. I don't know how they all did together, you know? That's a lot of Capricorns, right?
They love hiking.
I guess so. Watch, you'll see. I'm going to tell you their birthdays. Actually, there's really not that many. There's like, oh yeah, January's and February's. It's all January's and February's mostly. Okay. So, again, the leader is Igor, right? He was just 23 years old and a radio engineer student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute. He was the most experienced of the crew, and he was obsessed with mountain tourism. The 9 other hikers setting off with Dyatlov were Alexandra. I'm already nervous to say the fucking last name. Shit. Alexander Kolovatov, born November 16th, 1934, 24 years old. Zina Kolomogrova, born January 12th, 1937. She was 22. And she was described to have a very bright personality. She was lovely from her photos that I saw. Yuri Doronchenko, he was born January 29th, 1938. He was 21 years old. And he was described to be a very, very brave young man. Ludmila Dubinina. I like that one. That one's nice. Ludmila was born May 12th, 1938. She was 20 years old, very experienced in traveling, very shy but strong. Rustam Slobodin was born January 11th, 1936. He was 23 years old, very athletic and well-trained physically. Semyon Zolotaryov, born February 2nd, 1921. He was 38 years old. He was the oldest of the group. He asked to join the expedition just a couple of weeks before they went off. I guess he only needed one more expedition for whatever he needed. He was in World War II. He was just really quickly accepted by the group despite not knowing, like not being close friends with them like all the other ones were. And he had a large age difference there. Nikolai Tibu Brignoles, and they called him Tibu, born July 5th, 1938. He was 23 years old. He made friends very easily with everybody. He was mature and very serious despite his young age. Yuri Krivanashenko was born February 7th, 1935. He's 23 years old. He was the joker of the group. He was the most playful. And he was very well liked. And the 10th member was Yuri Yudin, born July 19th, 1937, 21 years old, and was described to be a very, very kind person and good friend. So they were all pretty young.
Yeah.
And I think when I first thought of this story, I just didn't expect them to be all that young.
No.
Yeah. Like you think of
That's
like these, you picture these like, you know, probably middle-aged.
Yeah.
You could, when you hear of well-experienced hikers, you know?
Right.
But I mean, these are people in college in Russia. So I mean, this is what they do.
Yeah.
The group arrived by train in Evdel on January 25th and took a truck to Vizay village, which was the last inhabited settlement where they would see other humans. 50 miles from the pass, it was a gateway to the Ural Mountains. They spent the night there and stocked up on food, including several loaves of bread. The hikers wrote in their diaries and had fun taking pictures together. And these photos you can find online. Actually, you can find photos of their dead bodies online as well, if you're into that kind of thing. But it is really interesting to see all the memories that they captured together, and they looked like they truly had so much fun. Like you could tell they were so excited and so happy to go off on this expedition together. On January 27th, they began their trip from Vizay to Ortorton. January 28th, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, was having problems with his knee. He had really bad rheumatoid arthritis and he was feeling unbearable, so he decided to turn back and leave the group. Disappointed.
Is he the older one?
He was not.
Okay.
Disappointed, Yuri Yudin had no idea he was actually escaping his death. He ended up being the only survivor of this expedition. On January 31st, the hikers ended up at the edge of the highland area, and February 1st, they started to move through the pass. The weather began to get terrible. There was a snowstorm, and the visibility was becoming greatly decreased by the minute on the Russian mountains. This is where everything took a turn for the worst. In the midst of the whiteout, the hikers got lost and headed west towards Kolitsikul, where they made the decision to set up camp at the bottom of a mountain slope. Sadly, if the hikers had traveled just 1.5 kilometers more, they would have reached an area surrounded by woods where they would have had a lot more protection from the elements, but instead they were set up in the wide open, which is strange when you think about experienced hikers, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that would explain that to me is that it was just whiteout conditions and they really couldn't tell where they were going at that point. Igor Dyatlov wrote in his diary on the 31st of January, one day before the tragedy occurred. Today, the weather is a bit worse with wind and snow. Until now, we walked along a Mansi trail, which was crossed by a deer hunter not long ago. The hunter didn't follow the beaten path, and now we're following in his steps. Walking is especially hard today. We can't see the trail, and we have to advance slowly. Tired and exhausted, we started the preparations for the night. We had supper in the warmth of the tent. It is hard to imagine such a comfort somewhere on the ridge with the piercing wind, hundreds of kilometers from human settlements. And this was the last words left by the group. The group left the next day for Mount Ortorton, but they couldn't make it due to the worsening weather. They only made it 1.5 miles in, and they found themselves setting up their camp for their last time at Mount Holyshackle, which is known as Dead Mountain. Uh-oh.
Why is it known as Dead Mountain?
I don't know. That's what it's known as.
Okay, that's scary.
Dyatlov had informed everybody back at home that they would be back by February 12th, roughly. That did not happen. By the 20th of February, all of the hikers' family and friends feared the worst and demanded that a search and rescue be done for their loved ones. February 21st, the first search party would set out, a week after the hikers were due back. A massive search began, including professional search teams, students from their university, volunteers, police, military, planes, helicopters for aerial searching, and dogs searching on land. And on February 26th, approximately 24 days after their deaths, a partially snow-covered tent, their campsite, was reported found by fellow student hikers Boris Slobstov and Mikhail Sharavin, accompanied by a local forestry worker named Ivan Pashin, who lived and worked along the Mansi people, indigenous to that region. So there's a Mansi tribe that has been living in this area in the Ural Mountains for thousands of years. I found that fascinating. I mean, I know there's Eskimos all over, but I just found that surprising because these conditions just seem unbearable. I mean, I hate the snow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from the amount of snowfall that they get and the amount of snowfall they get and the winds and the elements are just insane. Passion later stated in his testimony, on February 23rd, we were dropped off by helicopter. Once we descended, we found ski tracks from the hikers. Here we pitched a tent and spent the night. The next day, we divided into groups and went to look for the hikers. As a result of the search, we found the tent with belongings. This statement was backed up by searchmate and friend Shegelikov. Shegelikov said, on the second day, we found the tent of hikers. It was badly snow-drifted. We did not go inside. Now, it is really odd that Pashin and Shegelikov, that's what it is. It is odd that Pashin and Shegelikov wouldn't have looked inside and immediately reported that finding on the second day. It would be 2 more days until it was reported found and investigated by Boris and Mikhail. Boris and Mikhail also reported that Pashin didn't want to go with them in the direction that they found the tent. This is shady behavior of Pashin, in my opinion. And it makes me wonder why this behavior was so strange from him. Did it have anything to do with his knowledge in relationship to the Mansi people? Because he was the only one in that search group that worked alongside the Mansis and knew them. So he found the tent, didn't look in it, didn't report it, and let other people find it 2 days later and report it. But then when he made his statement, I don't know if he kind of forgot that he didn't report it right away or whatever, but he clearly made it clear that they found it on, the next day, which was February 24th.
Not saying anything at all.
I know. Yeah. So he says he and his friends say they found it on the 24th, and it wasn't reported found and investigated until the 26th by Boris and Mikkel. Okay. So it's very strange. The campsite was an eerie sight. It was abandoned and badly destroyed. Their tent was covered in snow and half torn down, with all the group's belongings still inside, including boots and jackets. Upon further investigation, it was obvious that the tent was not unzipped, but instead sliced open, several slices. In an official report by Boris Slobstov, he stated, "There was a flashlight found on top of the snow of the tent. The tent itself was torn. There were food supplies in bags at the feet and blankets unfolded. Under blankets spread out were their quilted jackets, storm jackets, and backpacks laid on the floor. Approximately 15 to 20 meters from the tent, footprints of the hikers were visible on the snow, and it was evident that the tracks were left by the feet of a person without shoes. It should be noted that the tracks were initially together, next to each other, and then distant tracks diverged." So here we're talking, these people walked out of a tent without clothes on, without being fully clothed in coats and boots, right? Without their food, and they're walking into these horrible whiteout conditions, into this storm. Mm-hmm. And it shows that the tracks, they're just walking together before they all separate. Like, how bizarre, right? Very bizarre. That alone. I mean, we don't talk about experienced hikers going hiking.
Right.
And them do this kind of shit.
Right.
Many accounts of this story claim that the tent was determined to be cut from the inside, and the hikers must have been in a panic to escape, frightened to have left behind their winter gear and boots. But the footprints showed otherwise. The prints showed the hikers were calmly walking together in a line, walking down the slope, and led searchers to some bodies. Almost a mile from the campsite, the bodies of Yuri Krivishenko and Yuri Doronchenko were found dead and frozen under a cedar tree. So almost a mile from the campsite. That's a long time to walk with no winter gear, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, how far?
Almost a mile. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
And in those conditions, it's not a 20-minute walk.
No.
Like for us to walk 20 minutes a mile, Right. Official report from Evgeny Maslinikov said, "The bodies were in a half-naked state. On Krivonishenko's body was a checkered shirt, torn white underpants, and trunks, no other clothing.
What?
On Doronchenko's body was a shirt, checked shirt, padded pants, and no shorts, no other clothing. Inspection detected that they were lit or were in a pretty decent fire of cedar and fir tree branches." So maybe they tried to light a fire to be desperate for warmth. I don't know. If they didn't light a fire, then they were in a decent fire. Like, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Later on, Igor Dyatlov's body was found just 1,000 feet away towards the campsite from where Yuri K and Yuri D were found. The group leader was clearly making an attempt to get back to the tent, but appeared to have collapsed around a birch tree. Evgeny Maslenikov stated in her official report, "Dyatlov was dressed warmer than Krivonishenko and Doronchenko, but he was not wearing a hat, shoes, or gloves, nor an undershirt or jacket." 350 meters uphill from Dyatlov, we found the body of Zina Kolomogorova. She was laying sideways, knees pulled up to her stomach, arms bent at the elbows and held up to her face. Zina was dressed better than Dyatlov, but she did not have a jacket, shoes, or gloves. In February, in the Ural Mountains, the average temp was only 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit, 16 degrees Celsius. This temperature far exceeded the freezing point of 32 degrees Fahrenheit. 0 degrees Celsius. What would make these hikers leave all of their cold winter gear behind and abandon their shelter? Hats, mittens, warm undergarments, they were all left behind. The tent also contained 2 finished knives used for carving and 3 axes. 6 days after the first 4 bodies were discovered, Rustam Slobodin's body was found on March 5th. He was located in between Dyatlov and Zina, and he was also facing in the direction of the tent.
He was like, they're like buried in snow too, by the way.
So these bodies, these first bodies are not deeply buried. They're not.
No.
But the remaining ones are. But that's because it took a lot longer.
Yeah,
And I think there was a lot of snow drifts going on.
Yeah.
So these were, they were, there was snow on them, but it was like they could be found just by searchers. So they didn't have to use tools to dig.
Okay.
All 5 bodies were flown to Ivdal for autopsy by forensic medical expert Voroshinny. Doroshenka, Krivoshenka, Dyatlov, Palmagrova, and Slobodam. I just had to fucking kill myself there, didn't I? I had to use all the last names. All had cuts and bruises to their noses, eyebrows, and cheeks, and abrasions were found on their knuckles and the backs of their hands. Voroshinny concluded these markings were a result of falling over. The official cause of death for all 5 was ruled as hypothermia. Now, I know that these injuries don't sound that crazy, but the other injuries coming for the others are the ones that are like really bizarre. These were found closer to the tent, and their injuries were definitely less serious. I mean, they still were serious because their faces were, when you think of a guy, you find a body that has cuts to his eyebrow bones and his nose and his face, and his hands are all cut up and bruised. What do you think? Right? You think like, this dude fought somebody, right? That's what I think. He got punched in the face. He punched somebody in the face. Some shit went down.
Yeah.
But we don't just say, hypothermia if we don't know. But I could see these injuries because they're not that severe. I could see them being like, okay, these people died by the cold.
It's like, oh, well, we found them in the snow and their bodies are frozen, so therefore it must be.
Right,
yeah.
right. So officials attempted to quietly bury the bodies of the 5 friends hundreds of miles from their home in an effort to divert the growing attention to the case.
What?
They didn't want this to go crazy. They didn't want the public to go crazy about it. They didn't have an answer, and people were in an uproar. They decided that it would be a good idea to bury the bodies away from their family and homes. Like, it's insane. It's insane.
Why? What are they hiding?
This set conspiracy theorists into an uproar. Under the pressure from the public, officials were forced to return the bodies home. I would have been rip shit. Yeah. Like, don't you dare bury my kid somewhere. Like, Thousands of people attended their funeral and family. Friends and city people demanded answers from the military and authorities. People at the funeral noted that the KGB were present. Do you know what the KGB is?
Yes.
It's basically like the government, right? Like the undercover, like, I don't know what it stands for. Do you know?
It's like the CIA, isn't it?
Yeah. It is weird. But it was noted that they were there watching the services, which is very weird, right? Why?
They're a security service.
So, yeah.
Of the Communist Party.
Yeah. So there was several people commenting that they were there watching. Very weird. And that also got the conspiracies flowing, along with rumors of unusual lights that were spotted in the sky, strange photographs developed from the hikers' cameras, and military testing in the area. So these were all rumors and theories that started spreading around. Other hikers hiking in the Ural Mountains just 2 weeks after the tragedy of the Dyatlov Pass incident testified that they too saw very strange lights in the sky that formed into spheres and disappeared quickly. In that moment, they had no idea what the light could have been, but later recounted that it was most likely a rocket. They believed it was a rocket. Many believe military rockets could have had some sort of involvement with the mysterious deaths of the hikers, but the autopsies on all of the 5 first bodies showed zero signs or evidence of injury from any missile blasts or explosions, and there was no debris found by the search teams. So the lights thing is weird. Do you remember the thing about the lights with the story in the sky?
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, we'll get into that. The search continued into weeks looking for the last 4 hikers, and 3 months after the incident, the snow was melting and a Mansi native named Korokov spotted some oddly cut branches just 150 feet from the cedar tree that Yuri K and Yuri D were found under.
Okay.
Korokov discovered remains of some clothing that had appeared to be torn. The search team flooded in to search that area extensively. Vladimir Askenadze, a fellow student hiker, was one searching through the thick snow, and he said, "I had a professional probe. At the end of it was a hook. You stick it in and turn it and pull it back. After one such probe, I felt something soft. Well, I thought it was moss, but this was a piece of flesh."
Oh my God.
Immediately, everyone came running, and we quickly uncovered Ludia. So deep under the snow, approximately 12 feet down, was the body of Ludmila Dubinina. She was collapsed in a small ravine over a natural ledge. Then the 3 remaining bodies of Alexander Kolatov, Nikolay Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov were found close to Dubinina. Zolotaryov held a notebook in his frozen hands.
What?
But it was wet and it was completely empty of any writings, which I find weird. Like, I'm a little suspicious about this.
Yeah.
Gotta be honest. The bodies were carefully dug up and carried back, but by now, the rumors of military testing and possible radiation contaminations had spread, and the helicopter pilots were too afraid to transport the bodies. They actually refused to transport the bodies until they were placed into zinc-lined cases. So at this time, even senior officials were beginning to be suspicious. Nikolay Brignol was found dressed warmer than the others. He had a sheepskin jacket on, underlayer of shirts and pants, ski pants, and felt boots. He suffered from a mysterious and life-threatening blow to the right side of his head. Autopsy report by Boris Vozraj states, "I don't believe these wounds could have been the result of Thibault simply falling from his own height, like falling and hitting his head. The extensive depressed, multi-splintered fracture could be likened to the result of an impact with an automobile moving at high speed."
Wow.
Alexander Kolevatov was dressed well, with underlayer shirt and pants, and ski jacket and ski pants, but with only two pairs of fire-damaged socks on, missing his boots. Kolokotov revealed another suspicious injury. Autopsy report stated there is a wound of undetermined shape behind the right ear. The neck is long and thin and deformed in the area of the thyroid cartilage. It was officially stated that these hikers died from freezing to death, and the examiner seemed to make very little effort in understanding the causes for the injuries. Semyon also was wearing underlayer shirt and pants and ski jacket and ski pants with felt boots. He had horrific facial decay, presumably from the stream that he was found laying in, but strangely, he had suffered an unexplainable crushing impact to his chest. Boris Vozrazdeny, the medical examiner, reported the multiple fractures of Zolotaryov's ribs with hemorrhaging into the pleural cavity that were caused while still alive. and an effect from a high-power impact to the chest of Zolotaryov at the moment of his fall, squeezing, or throwing. Zolotaryov died as a result of violence. So that is one that was determined to be killed, like died as a result of violence.
Are you going to talk about the other thing about him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Ludia Dubinina. Did I say that right? Dubinina. Yeah. And finally, Ludia Dubinina wore underlayer pants, fire-damaged ski pants, 2 sweaters, no jacket. She had 1 foot covered in a torn sweater. She was found laying face down in a stream of melting snow. The examiner stated this caused her horrific facial decay and her missing eyes. He also noted without any further explanation that her tongue was missing and blood was found in her stomach. She also suffered a brutal impact to her chest, fracturing multiple ribs that was powerful enough to puncture her heart, which is not easy to do. The autopsy reported, I think that the death of Ludia Dubinina was caused by massive hemorrhage into the right ventricle of her heart, multiple bilateral rib fractures and internal bleeding. The trauma was caused during life and is the result of high force impact with subsequent fall or throw to the chest of Dubinina. So here we have some major impact injuries to chests and throats, right? And it seems like almost inhumane to me. Like the injuries are so strange. This was all that they had. It's like just this impact to her chest, right? And puncturing her heart, missing her tongue, missing her eyeballs.
Zolotaryov's eyes missing too, it looks like.
So there is more on the autopsies coming, and I believe Zolotaryov had missing just altogether soft tissue of his face, like everything there. And again, because they rule here with the autopsy that because these 2 were in the water or in the melting snow in the stream, that this is why they have no eyes and they have no soft tissue.
It's a very, very scary looking. I had a little bit of a hard time finding the pictures just by Googling. Did you? But if you go to Dyatlov there's all the pictures of everything, including like their funerals, including the pictures they took themselves. And the pictures you're going to get into.
Yes, and the pictures are super graphic of their bodies. They are very
graphic, so warning.
Yeah, warning, definitely.
Especially of
that.
The missing eyes.
It's so terrifying. Sick looking. It really is. It's horrific for sure. Yeah, terrifying. All of the clothing found on the hikers was ordered to be tested for radioactivity.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why too. What made them think to do that? It's a really good point.
Yeah.
Like why? Is that standard? Like you find dead bodies and you're like radioactivity, like let's check.
Right.
Interesting, right?
Maybe the burns.
Yeah, there was burns. There was a burn on someone's leg too. So like so many different sources will have different reports, right? And I had to like actually find from examiner's report, like the actual autopsy reports this. So there was just so many sources that talked about like a super bad burn on one of the guy's leg.
Yeah.
I think that would have been the first Yuri K and Yuri D, because it was clear that they were in a fire. And one of them had a really bad burn on the leg, some sources say. But then when I come to the autopsy reports, it doesn't say anything about that. So I'm not 100% on it. What I'm saying is being read from the autopsy reports. So a criminalist expert, Natalia Sakharova, whom has worked for 10 years as a doctor in the prison system and 16 years as an expert criminalist for police, has studied the documents of this case very extensively and has found a lot of problems with the medical examiner's conclusions, starting as early as the tent. Experts at the time had suggested that the tent was cut from the inside by the hikers themselves. This fact eliminated any further investigation into the possibility that they could have been attacked.
Yeah.
So when you hear that they cut themselves out from the inside, you're not looking for anything else now. Like, you're not even going to explore the possibility that they're attacked, right?
Right.
I mean, still, somebody could have probably forced them out, or they would have been scared enough. But it's just crazy that it was just ruled that they cut from the inside, like, you know, and it wasn't even. So as she explains here, Natalia doubted the tent was cut by the hikers. She said, "There is not one cut. The tent is torn to shreds." She also commented about the fibers of the tent facing the wrong direction. Had the tent been sliced from the inside, she said the experts should have been looking for this, and the fibers weren't facing in the right direction.
Well, like, clearly some of them died a very violent death, so it doesn't really matter, like, who cut, like... Well, I mean, it matters, like, as far as, like, theories of what actually happened, because... Yeah. But it doesn't mean that they weren't attacked, you know?
Right. But right off the rip, when they, you know, I guess just assuming that they cut it out themselves, I feel like everybody thought that they were just scared and running from something, you know? So it could be anything. It could be like a rumbling noise they think's an avalanche, or, you know, lights in the sky, or anything, you know? So, but interestingly though, that other group that was hiking, they saw the lights in the sky and they weren't terrified, you know? They didn't feel like they needed to leave their warmth and their shelter. So it's like, clearly it couldn't have been that. But it's a big deal because it just shouldn't have been ruled that they cut themselves out, because had somebody, you know, if the investigators, I mean, if the examiner was looking for the right things and saw the fibers were pointing inward, not outward, it would have looked as though right off the rip, okay, this was an attack by somebody. Right. And I think that, like, you know, all evidence going forward would have been looked at differently.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, it is like a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she said the experts should have looked for this, and as a result could have affected the interpretation of later evidence. Yeah. She claimed in her expert opinion she believed this was no accident, it was murder. Marin County, California, or way over there now. Ken Holmes, who worked 36 years in a coroner's office, the last 12 being the elected coroner, also disagreed with the accuracy of the conclusions. He said for at least 7 of the hikers. He said the trauma precludes any accidental falls. It appears the officials at the time basically tried to sweep this entire thing under the rug as an unfortunate accident. Mick Fennerty, a retired FBI special agent for over 20 years and is with 15 years on evidence response team, has dealt with many complex crime scenes. His opinion is Occam's razor. Yep. You know, the most simple answer is the most correct. He stated, you just can't explain why they would leave their boots unless they were forced out of the tent.
Something was scarier to them than hypothermia.
Yeah. Yep. Or someone for making them leave, like, leave now, you know?
The only way that, like, I would leave a tent like that in the snow is if it was on fire. Or if something was trying, and you just literally don't have time to put your shoes on.
Take your shoes, you don't have time.
Running away to save your life.
He declared by looking at the injuries, he felt homicide was the only explanation. Sure. Ludmila and Zylatarov's injuries started just under their collarbones and only went halfway down. So these are the ones that had the crushed impact to their chests. Yeah. So it started like right under the collarbone, right? It's weird. It's like just one like little area of the body, which is unusual. It was as if they were laying on their back and something massive stepped on them. Yeah. Like that could explain it. Injuries like this are seen in serious motor vehicle accidents or falls from well above 50 feet. Yeah. It could be possible that a very hefty person could have been jumping on their chest. That could have caused these injuries, you know? So person or you know what I like. Yeah. I like that theory. But So we'll get into that.
Yeah.
The criminalist expert stated that the missing tongue of Dubinina was most probable to have been cut or torn off due to blood being found in her stomach.
So she was still alive?
She was still alive, yeah. She stated Thibault was found in the same stream, and in her opinion, he was struck with his head being unsupported. Yeah, so he was found in the same stream as her, and he had his tongue, right? Because the medical examiner first just basically was like, all the soft tissue was because they were in the stream. It's missing because of that. But the tongue is like a really thick, serious muscle.
Right.
It's not like eyeballs, where even eyeballs, like maybe some fish came up and ate some eyeballs.
It was so cold.
Yeah, but there is fish. Because that's how the Mansi people, they fish, ice fishing. So, you know,
so
it's possible. But then again, it said it was a melting stream of like snow. So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Klivatov had the strange injury behind his ear. Like it was a weird shape, like very weird shape. They just like couldn't pinpoint what the heck that could be. And his thyroid cartilage was deformed. She said, "This is no accident. The man was most likely strangled." That makes sense to me. I mean, the weird injury behind the ear is very strange. I think it's maybe some sort of,
by the neck.
Imagine if it was like a claw. Ooh.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Yes. It is very difficult for any experts to come up with any other conclusion other than there were other people present during this horrific incident. And we know that the Vizay village is 50 miles from the pass, but the Mansis are pretty nearby. Some believe the unusual lights in the sky is a key factor in solving the case, and some believe it's just a red herring. A friend of the group, Boris, stated maybe this was a chemical or a psychological impact. Maybe it stunned or blinded them by I don't know what. This is just my opinion. So like people are all over the place with theories on this.
Because there isn't one that fits.
It just doesn't. Like nobody can wrap their mind around it. And this is like a good friend of the group thinking that maybe some sort of, this is to me when he says a chemical or psychological impact, I'm thinking like chemical warfare. Like he thinks it's military related or alien. Maybe, because lights in the sky and the radiation thing. Yeah. So there was radiation found on 2 of the final 4 hikers' clothing. The sweater that Ludia was wearing actually belonged to Krivonchenko. She clearly had to have taken his sweater after he had already died in an attempt to save herself from the cold. Makes sense now, because if you think about the first hikers that were found dead, they had almost no clothing on.
Right.
So the other 4, they may have been maybe alive a little longer and they stole their clothing once they were already gone, Okay. So that makes sense. So it belonged to Krivonchenko, and he had worked at a facility that had a massive radiation explosion 1.5 years earlier. Now that's a long time before.
Sure.
But that's what they're going with.
Doesn't go away.
That's what they're going with, yeah.
Yeah.
So this explosion was the 3rd largest after Fukushima and Chernobyl. The radiation was most likely remaining on the sweater fibers from his work. Okay. So his sweater and the sweater that she was wearing that was his, that's what they're going with on this. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can go with that.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
We'll go with it. But I mean, what it's
an awful lot of, again, awful lot of coincidences.
It is coincidental. But it is also coincidental that he worked somewhere that had an explosion.
Exactly.
So it is kind of weird. And so it was just those 2 items. Like there was so many sources that were like every item in the campsite was full of radiation. And it's like, that's cool to think. Like I right away was like aliens and, but then once I really dug deep, it's like, then you start to like learn so much. That's the thing about this. When we do stories, like the more that you dig, it's like the less mysterious things become sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So The military was very eager to be involved in this case. The Soviet government classified and sealed radiation evidence up quickly because they didn't actually want the radiation explosion to leak, because it would have been a great blow to their nuclear credibility. And the explosion accident had not been disclosed yet at this point. So, well, there was obviously thousands of people that died, and there was a lot of people that had to like rehome and move, but it didn't go public. Like it wasn't, which is crazy. Yeah, it wasn't worldwide news. And, this is Russia we're talking about. So they really didn't want this to. So that would explain the government, sealing it and classifying that radiation stuff. Because at first when I heard that, I was like, that's fishy. Why are they so quickly sealing this up?
Now, that was the only item that had
those 2 sweaters.
Okay, they were both his?
And they were both his.
Okay.
Yeah, but she was wearing one of them, but it's clear that she took it off of him,
Yeah. Or maybe even borrowed it from him at some point.
True. Yeah, we don't know this. Yeah, exactly. So this would best explain why the government was so quick to seal and classify that evidence. A letter was written to the chief of Ivdel, Department of Internal Affairs Militia Major, and it stated, "It is necessary to corroborate if the hikers were attacked by Mansi with religious motives." Despite immediate suspicion, the Mansi as prime suspects were ruled out quickly due to the evidence given that the tent was cut from the inside, and because local Russians testified that the Mansis were very friendly, and the Mansis were actually very helpful in the investigation.
Yeah.
So, but we know that
one dude.
Yeah, yep. He worked with them, right? He worked alongside them and knew them. But we know from just knowing how serial killers work and, murderers and stuff, they will often go back to the scene, right? Like perpetrators will do that. They want to be involved because they want to know what's going on with the case.
Right.
So to think like, oh, the Mansis were helping investigate, like you can't rule that out. You just can't. There was so many contradictory accounts from interviews with some of the Mansi people. One young man named Peter Batterell, in an interview, this is interesting, told investigators that the Mansi do not have a prayer mountain nowadays. But just 10 days earlier, his brother Nikita stated that the Mansi prayer mountain is 30 kilometers up the Vizay River. One young man named Havril stated that the Mansi never went near the area that the bodies were found because even for them it was too dangerous. But signs from the Mansi were located all around the trail that the hikers were traveling, suggesting in fact that some did go to that area, in fact, and had. And they took photos. The hikers took photos of these signs, the Mansi signs.
Saw them, yeah.
A Mansi chum, which is like a teepee of sticks.
Okay, yeah.
Was found not far from the tent, the campsite. And Dyatlov had taken photos of it. So it was evidence in there. I feel like, it was smart to do that.
And it doesn't mean like that people as a whole did it. What if there was like one crazy person in the tribe?
Exactly. Because like, it's really like, it's crazy to accuse a whole
people.
Right. You can't do that.
Right.
But it just is, it's very telling to me because let's face it, it's windy as hell. The conditions are crazy. And here is this chum. It's almost left there as like a warning to them or something. I feel like when I see the picture, I got that feeling like it was kind of eerie. It was clear that the Mansi people had in fact traveled that path, at least in the past, and the conflicting information from the young men is concerning, I think.
Yeah.
Closer to Dyatlov route, the hikers snapped photos of a large cave, and they had no idea that that cave was actually a sacred prayer site called Man Pupuner. It happened to be the most sacred place of the entire location. The mighty stone towers told the story of a great Mansi shaman who turned giant warriors into stone when they threatened to destroy them. And ironically, Mount Ortorten, their goal destination, had similar stone pillars there. So they were right there at a sacred prayer site for the Mansi. So, I don't know.
So these people, are they known to sacrifice?
So from the Russians' accounts, they're super friendly and they didn't know of anything like that.
Yeah.
But I do think that if there is some sort of like religious boundary crossed, some of them or somebody could have, or there could just be one Mancy that wants to be a serial killer.
Wasn't it snowing wicked hard? Why is now the chance to like go kill 9 people?
Correct. But these conditions, these people have lived their whole lives. So, this is nothing to them. To us, we would be dying, and like literally, right? But to them, they're just like, they know that mountain like the back of their hand, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The camera found at the hikers' campsite was actually fully intact and undamaged, obviously, because we have all these photos. The prints were all developed, and the camera was found on an improvised tripod. The lens was open and ready to shoot, and people believe that it was intentionally set up, like being prioritized in the panic. But I think that theory doesn't prove anything. I mean, it could have already been.
They ran away without their shoes. They're not.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Like, there's so many accounts of people like, there must have been something spectacular that needed to be photographed if they stopped to set this tripod up. It's like, this tripod was probably already set that way.
Didn't one of the guys grab his camera when he left?
Yes, that I did see on several different accounts.
He left one in his tent and left the other around his neck, and he was the guy that was missing his eyes.
Yes, he did. He was missing his eyes. I want to say I had this in here and I took it out because I just wasn't 100% on it, because again, it's so hard with just so much different information from so many sources. I started to like lose my mind, and I didn't want to say anything that was incorrect. But yes, I did actually know that he did bring his camera.
Yeah.
That one must not have been salvaged.
That one was damaged. There were pictures, but you can't really see what they are.
Right.
They are like kind of freaky, but it's just like weird shapes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Because this camera, the final picture is the 33rd frame, they call it. And that was the one that showed like a bright light in the sky that was blurred. It almost looked like it was falling. Yeah. And I don't know. I did read somewhere too that like they did an investigation on that, and it determined that it like was an actual photo. It wasn't like I don't know,
like a glitch on the film.
Yeah.
Or like bad film or whatever.
Yeah, it was like an intentional photo. It was just out of focus. Yeah. Is what they determined. So that 33rd frame, again, with the whole lights in the sky theory, people really stuck on that, and they just couldn't get away from that. But this camera also had the blurred footage of a large dark figure lurking in the distance. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
It's so good.
I did.
Many conspiracy theorists love the idea that they captured a Yeti on film. The Russians believe in their Russian Yeti. In the Evening Your Torten newspaper, under a section labeled Science, it declared, in recent years, there has been a heated debate about the existence of the Yeti. According to recent reports, Yeti lives in the northern Urals near the Ortorten Mountains. So that's in their newspaper. It's pretty cool. I think I love the idea of Yeti. I really want to go with Yeti. I mean, from the beginning, I've always wanted to go with Yeti. Yeah. But the more I dug in deeper, well, I'm almost done here. So let's get to this bottom and then we'll talk about that. Okay. May 1959, the case was closed. It only recently was reopened, and it was finally considered solved, with likely an avalanche explaining some of the forceful injuries, right? Of the people. Yeah, some, right?
Avalanche doesn't cause burns.
And and there's literally no sign of an avalanche anywhere. Like when the searchers were out, if there's an avalanche, there's going to be trees down. There was ski poles in photos next to the tent that was still there, sticking straight up. Like there was nothing, and it's like, come on, the tent, that you would not have found the tent if there was an avalanche. Like,
and they wouldn't be outside of the tent half naked, half burned with their eyeballs missing. They'd be in the tent sleeping. Maybe they heard it coming.
Yeah, and they rushed out, but they would have been covered in snow, and they wouldn't have had the injuries they had. Correct. Yes, they might have been crushed, but they just wouldn't have been to the level of extent of, it's clear that some of them, there was a fist fight because one of them, her knuckles and hands were like almost like a bloody pulp. Wounds. Yes, it looks like that. Or
maybe punch somebody.
Mm-hmm. That's what it looked like to me. So it's just crazy, that they could rule this as solved with saying an avalanche and hypothermia. When we know with at least one, the medical examiner did clearly say that this was violence. Yeah. There's been speculation that they turned against each other, but there was so many friends of the crew that came forward and was like, absolutely not. Like, there's no way that would have happened. Then again, in the conditions like that, there's just like literally so many different theories. Like, did you ever hear about the one where it's something about the wind? There's they were in a perfect spot where the wind would whirl around and it would cause like a humming, which would drive someone mad.
Oh, like Havana syndrome or whatever that's called.
Something to the point where it would be just the noise that would just drive them insane and make them just so out of it. Okay, but and crazy.
Some of them were burned and crushed.
Yes. So that's what I mean. Like the theories are just crazy because none of them fit. Right. Some of them do, but not most of them don't. Yeah. Yeah. Like there's so many people, if you look like on forums, like, what you think happened to them, people will be like, oh, it's simple. The wildlife ate their eyes and ate the tongue. It's like, okay. And left everything else.
I mean, I guess.
But like, no, wolves don't come and eat eyeballs and say, whoa, that was yum. And they leave. No, the whole pack is going to tear the shit out of them. Right. Right. I just don't see how that could be. That's just fucking so whack.
Especially like with all the other weirdness added into it, it
really doesn't.
It doesn't really help give us an answer.
Yeah, it really, really doesn't. I really think that obviously we'll talk. Oh, well, first of all, let me finish with this last line, okay? All of the hikers were buried together, even Yuri, the 10th, because at age 75 years old, when he died in 2013, he wished to be buried and reunited with his friends at Yekaterinburg Cemetery. So I thought that was very touching.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. It just goes to show that for his whole life, he felt like he cheated that death.
Right.
Like he was supposed to die with them.
Yeah.
And he felt like he needed to be reunited.
Yeah. Wow.
It's kind of beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So they're all together at that cemetery. There's a beautiful memorial plaque with all their names. So obviously, some theories are like military cover-ups, UFOs, aliens, Russian Yetis, Mansi people, and the avalanche, which we're definitely crossing the avalanche off. The whole wind fucking theory thing, I'm crossing that off too. Yeah. And as far as like military cover-ups, sure. I mean, I could totally see them dropping some fucking...
Didn't realize someone was out there.
Yep, dropping some tests out there to see with chemical warfare.
Know because the Mansi people lived there.
So yeah, that's true.
Not that the government cares about indigenous people. We know that they fucking don't. But
yeah, and they've had it out too between them, the government and the Mansi people at some point. Like I forget when, but there was like a big thing where so it's.
But they probably wouldn't choose an area that's habitated.
No, and if it was some sort of testing for chemical warfare, there would be evidence. It would show on them. There would be burns. There would be in their throats, in their lungs. There'd be evidence of that, and there wasn't any.
That leaves us with
UFOs and Russian Yeti and Mansi people. So I love the whole Yeti thing. Like I said, I have to say, as much as I'm for aliens, I'm not going to say this is aliens.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm not going to say this is aliens.
And I don't think it's the Mansi people.
So I didn't at first, but now I do.
Yeah.
So I was really on Yeti, but then think about it. Like, why wouldn't unless it was covered up, but why wouldn't anybody have found like really large footprints? Like abnormally large footprints. Why wouldn't there be any?
It snowed.
It did snow, but they still found the hikers' footprints.
Okay.
So if that was the case, right? If a Yeti scared them from their tent and they ran and they all went separate ways and this Yeti was just whipping them around and throwing them at trees and shit, it would make sense, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like there would be a lot more evidence of something large being there.
Yeah.
And there just was not anything found besides normal bare feet, but bare footprints. I mean, I don't know.
So that means that there was no Mansi footprints either.
Well, there was footprints that were barefoot, but there was also hikers that were wearing felt boots. Right. So those could be, the way I think of it, mixed in.
Yeah.
And I think with the whole, they were following this trail. There was Mansi signs everywhere that they couldn't read because it's a different language and they didn't know what it was. They were just taking photographs, and then they were taking photographs of this prayer mountain, and we don't know what kind of, religious boundaries that the Mansi might have had that they felt violated or offended or whatever.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, they know the area so well, they could have totally went up to the tent, started slicing it up, scared the shit out of them.
Okay, but it's very obvious when a human beats another human to death. They know what that looks like.
And another good point is they did have a photo of that Yeti looking thing. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And another good point is their footprints were not running. So like there was nothing, the footprints were calm. There was no traces and trails of running in a panic. So if that was somebody from the Mansi leading them out, right? Like maybe there was several of them and they were like, follow me, like, go, we're going to kill you. You need to walk single file, like, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Because I think.
Yeah, because if they left in a panic and didn't take their clothes, their footprints would have been panicked and all over the place.
Yes, and
so
you would have seen.
Instead, they were woken up.
Yep. And they were walked out and led down away from the campsite. Probably to not be found easily, I would think. Yeah. And who else would do that better than the Mansis? They probably know the best spots. Yeah. Oh, nobody's going to find them here for months. Yeah. And they didn't. Yeah. They didn't find them for months. Those snow drifts were so bad in that area. 12 feet under the snow. That's fucking insane. Like, so, I mean, the Yeti photo, I got to admit, does play.
But it could have been something else. And I think that we're primed to think that it's a Yeti because it looks just like every other, like the way that it's holding its body looks like a Bigfoot.
Yes.
It looks just like that. Remember that Bigfoot footage that was taken, like the film in like the 70s or something?
It legit looks.
It really looks just like that.
It really does. And that doesn't strike me as a person unless because the Mansis did wear big coats of animal fur, right? Yeah. And maybe there was a Mansi in the distance, like watching them, and they took that photo for a reason. Yeah. So it's like, it's tough. It's tough.
Maybe that's why that guy, once he realized where they were, he was probably like, oh shit, like and he doesn't want to like rat on them either.
Right. So maybe that's what I'm thinking. That guy, Pushin or whatever his name is, he might have, when he got to the tent and saw it, was like, oh shit. Yeah. This is Mansi. Like, I'm not.
They're way too close to this prayer thing.
Yeah.
I know what happened here.
I'm not getting involved in this. Yeah. It's very possible. So it is interesting. I do love the idea that the Yeti came and stomped on people and shit and threw them around. Obviously, these are humans that lost their lives, so we don't mean to be disrespectful. but we just love.
We will get called out.
The Russian, yeah, we will. The Russian Yetis is just a really awesome thing.
Yeah,
like in my mind.
Do you think Yeti is the same as Bigfoot?
Yeah, I think Yeti is just the cold version of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
He lives in the cold. But no, I don't even really know if he is like white. He's probably just literally looks exactly like Bigfoot. He's just covered in snow. Or
they can like camouflage. Maybe they lived maybe it's
chameleon?
An evolution thing. Maybe they're white because they live in the snow and they're not seen.
Yeah.
But then again,
that photo was like, it looked just like dark, a Bigfoot. Yeah, like he was a hairy Bigfoot. Interesting.
Abominable snowman.
Yeah. I do think the Bigfoot's the same thing as Yeti.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is my story.
I loved it. Thank you. Good job with all the Russian. I know that was hard.
Oh my God. I'll never do another Russian case. I swear. It was a lot, but I do love this story. I always have.
Yeah, me too.
It's very sad that these very young kids lost their lives doing something they loved.
Yeah.
It's really, really tragic.
How scared they must have been.
Oh my God, yeah. And the injuries, like piercing your heart with your rib cage, like that's a serious blow.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah.
It's Mansi people. They can't cause that. What would they have done?
Mansi, if he was heavy enough, they did say a hefty person jumping on someone's chest could do that. And the mark behind the guys, it could have been like a weapon that they made.
Yeah.
Because it was a weird shape. It was like almost like a triangle.
Huh.
So, it's cool to think it's like a claw, but
yeah.
But it's just wicked bizarre. It's just a case that is wicked mysterious.
It is.
So, all right, you close up this time because I suck at it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
We will see you again soon.
All right. Stay mysterious.